Welcome to another episode of the Men for Life podcast. I'm Sean Corcoran, CEO of Men for Life. Today, I'm excited to have as a guest Josh Brahm, the co-founder and president of the Equal Rights Institute. Hey, Josh, how are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. You've got such a voice for radio. You've got like the perfect voice for this. You could be on NPR.
I remember people told me, teachers would tell me that in class when I was in high school. And in my own attempts at self-deprecation, I would always say, "You're saying I don't have a face for TV."
Right. That's not what I mean, but I do mean you have a great low voice.
Thank you. I never really thought, this didn't exist. So podcasting.
No,
So I never really thought about that. That it may be something I would use one day.
You might be hosting your own online radio show one day, and here you are.
Yeah,
well, it's great to meet you. It's great to be here.
It's great to meet you too. So I'll just give you a quick background on myself and on Men for Life, as it pertains to the pro-life movement.
Yeah.
I was raised Catholic, but I was raised Catholic in a family where we didn't talk about anything. We didn't talk about sex. We didn't talk about drugs. We didn't talk about, we just didn't talk about anything. And
like you guys were going to like church every week kind of a thing. You're like regular church going family.
I went to Catholic school.
Yeah.
So I knew what abortion was. I knew that abortion was wrong. It just wasn't we just didn't have deep conversations.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that stems from my parents growing up not having those conversations. And, and no fault to them. My parents are amazing. And they are the most excited people to be my parents, which is awesome considering all the things that I've put them through. So
I can identify with that, but also like it's cool. Like just get camp on that for a second, because thinking like Men for Life, like there's this really cool thing that Men for Life has always been about, is just trying to like help steward, especially young men into the pro-life movement, and to do that well. There are definitely ways that can go poorly, and you guys are kind of like, let's kind of make sure that we do that well. And part of being a good pro-life man is being a good pro-life dad. And one of the hard things I think about being a father is having the intentionality to create those hard conversations, to create space where we're going to talk about these things, but we're going to do it together and carefully and stuff. And it's easy for that not to happen. Like, I feel like that would be the easier thing, is like, we're all so busy. So we're just kind of going through life and kind of trying to survive. But I think it's a good reminder for us dads that it's important for us to try to make room for those important conversations. Because yes, they're going to be hearing stuff from their teachers and their pastor or priest or whatever, but they ought to be hearing from us on those important topics too.
Yeah, for sure. And what we don't want is for them to be hearing about it from their friends before they hear about it from us. For friends who may be hearing about it from places that we don't want to be the influence on our children. To then turning that.
If we want them getting wisdom, they're not going to get wisdom from their young friends, right? Like if wisdom comes with age and experience, like of course, like that's just going to be really, really important.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and that's something that that in a couple of my men's groups we talk about often, is the conversations that we have with our kids. And I err because of my life experience, and just to hit on that, when I was 19, away at college, met a girl. Got her pregnant. She came into my dorm room and she said, "Hey, I'm pregnant." And my mind immediately went to, okay, how am I going to make this work?
Right.
Like, how is this going to change my life? Yeah. How are we, and trying to, without the tools really to be able to have that conversation, to have that conversation. And she realized the conversation I was trying to have, and she stopped me and said, well, I'm not going to have the baby, which full stop, that on my life. That broke me. My dad did come to Tallahassee where I was in school. He did the best that he could with the tools that he had. He had conversations with her, really with her mom. And those conversations didn't go anywhere. The decision was made. Yeah. And so that was the end of that part of who I was. The beginning of a new chapter in my life, which resulted in a 7-year drug addiction, homelessness, lying on a hotel room floor, dying of an overdose, and not even realizing that any of it was connected to the precipitating event of losing my child. until I got to treatment. And when I got to treatment and they started like hitting me with the tough questions, and we started talking about what happens, what events have happened in your life. And I brought that up, and it just all came out, and it was the greatest gift I ever could have been given to have that realization so that I could deal with it and begin healing, to be able to be given the suggestion to name my child, and I named him Michael, and to, to really move forward. I think that if that had not happened in the way that it happened, that I may not be here today. I may have left treatment and gone right back, like so many people do, into the same behaviors. So with my kids, thank you. Me too. With my kids, when I say I err on the side of, the complete opposite of my family growing up, of not talking about anything. And we talk about everything. I bring my children with me when I speak at pro-life events. My older ones. My younger ones would just cause havoc.
Be a bit much. Yeah.
So they hear it, they understand it in the sense that they understand it, and I want them to ask questions about pregnancy, about abortion. I want them to ask questions when I speak about addiction. They're aware, and I want them to be aware. I don't want them to not have tools. But one of the lessons I've learned is that part of that, especially, my kids are 5, 6, 8, and 9. So part of that is having conversations with them about, these are conversations we have within our family, and I'm comfortable having these conversations with you, but not everyone's family is comfortable having these conversations with their 8-year-old and 9-year-old. I got a call from the head of our school that my 8-year-old daughter was explaining abortion to her 7-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And we're very close. And of all the people that this could have gone to, that's the best one, because she is very open and has the same philosophy. But any other kid, it would have been a different phone call. So
I mean, it's a really difficult thing, because I remember even when our kids were young and in school, like we didn't have, spoiler alert, we didn't have Santa Claus, like was not kind of like this running gag in the house. Like we just kind of told them kind of early, this is kind of like what it is. But we really tried to emphasize, like, don't spoil this for your friends. Don't tell them. Let the parents decide when they're going to really emphasize that. And yet I'm sad to say that whole school probably knew there was no Santa because of, our kids. Like it's hard sometimes to kind of help them to understand, that there are things that we talk about here, and then there are things that, maybe not so much out there on any topic, much less this. So yeah, that makes it really tricky.
Yeah. But I would rather take that hard than to just not have the conversations.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
So that's what brought me to Men for Life. I was sharing my story here in Lake Charles, Louisiana, at our local March for Life, and the head of Louisiana Right to Life was present. And
Nice.
And he heard my story, and unbeknownst to me, I was added to a speaker list on their website and started getting calls to
nice
speak
for
at
that
events.
to happen without your knowing it.
That's super excited. Like, how awesome is that? Because at the time I was practicing law and I hated it.
Oh, wow.
And so while it wasn't an immediate substitute and, for legal income, I mean, I was at the point where I disliked my legal career enough that that didn't matter.
Yeah.
It was no longer about the money. So that happened. And then I was asked if I would like to be the director of Men for Life. And I said, no, absolutely not. Like that is not something that I'm being called to do. I had given up practicing law, took my last client in August of 2021. After 4 years of discernment and in conversations about, I was practicing divorce law. And for me, it was draining, my energy that I had to give to my family. Sure. And I was getting stuck in court and not able to pick my kids up from school. The things that were very important to me were being taken away from me by the career. Yeah. That's why it was no longer about the money. There's no amount of money that they could have paid me to continue doing that.
Good for you.
And so I stopped doing that. And
that's a good dad move. That's a good man move of being like, okay, maybe work-life balance was working with this job before, but right now something's changed or things have shifted to this point. Like you never find work-life balance. It's like you kind of have to rediscover it, I think, every couple of months with your wife. Like, how are things going like
Right.
now? Because it's like life ebbs and flows, and work and kids responsibilities also shift. And so just recognizing that things had changed, it had changed to the point that sort of boundaries that were hard boundaries for you were being crossed, and you made a huge career shift over that. There are more guys, I think, ought to do that and don't have the courage to.
Well, I appreciate that. I've never thought of it as courageous. I've always thought of it as like an oh crap moment. Now that I've done it, what do I do next? And we were in a good position, so I had time. I knew that I had a cushion to figure out what do I do next. But running a nonprofit was not on my radar.
No.
And so I just said no. And then we started working on other projects, growing my wife's business and working on a passion project for fathers that I'm still kind of working on in the background. And they kept asking. And then I started feeling like, instead of feeling like, hey, God is not calling me to do this right now in the season of my life, we'd also adopted two more kids. So
oh wow, it's amazing.
There was just so much going on here.
Yeah,
that
your plate is full.
Right. And so then I started feeling like, man, I think God is calling me to do this, which was harder because it wasn't anymore about, hey, this is what I want to do. It was like, hey, this is where I need to be right now. So so I have to figure out how to make it work.
Sort of, and like, so in spite of what you might want to do.
Right.
I identify with that. I was just going to say, I identify with. Oh, good. You didn't want to be a divorce lawyer
at all. I didn't take family law. Like, I didn't believe in divorce, and so I didn't take any family law classes. I got out of law school. I went to work. That was the first thing they gave me, and I talked to multiple priests and hoping they would, like, wanting someone to tell me you can't do this as a Catholic, and instead they said,
very interesting.
These people need your help. They open up each meeting in prayer. They need your help. And so, I mean, I was guiding half of the people that came to me back to counseling, whether they went to counseling or just went to an attorney who wanted to help them get a divorce. I don't know, but I didn't want to do it, but God led me there. And then we got to a point where God was letting me know that whomever it was I was supposed to help, I had helped. And it was no longer where I was being called. So this is, another part of that journey. This is where God needs me right now. And who am I to say no to that?
Yeah.
So, which brings me to you, because you are the man of the hour right now. So, what brought you into the pro-life movement, and what brought you to start a pro-life organization?
Yeah, so my story starts pretty young. I was 11 years old when my dad took me with a group of men from our church to pray outside of an abortion clinic. In downtown Sacramento. The church that we were attending had been was very, very conservative and very pro-life, and they had been involved in the rescue movement. And so there would be people like regularly be like, hey, on Sunday, praise the Lord, I'm going to jail on Wednesday, like that kind of thing. And so it was very, very, like, they were hardcore pro-life. And my family wasn't doing rescues, but there was an afternoon that my dad took me with a group of guys to just pray. But no one told me what abortion was. So I had no idea what we were doing. I was confused and bored. We were just standing in front of this kind of ugly brick building, and I didn't understand like why. And later, when I talked to my parents about that, and they told me what abortion was, I asked basically what it was that we were doing. And as they kind of shared what abortion was, I went through the sequence of 3 emotions, where the first thing I felt was surprise. And it's just because my cultural bubble kind of got pierced for the first time. Like, I was 11, and the church that I went to, it was Protestant church, but like everyone kind of got homeschooled, and a lot of people had kind of big families, and that wasn't weird. It was just kind of conservative. So the idea that anyone would not want to be pregnant, that wouldn't be just this beautiful, wonderful thing, was just like new to me. And then I felt really, really sad about that. It didn't have this like anger side come out, but I felt really sad. And then I had a rising sense of, I guess I'm going to have to stop that when I grow up. Like any overzealous homeschool kid who's like, I'm going to be William Wilberforce. Like, that was basically me. So Frank Beckwith had just put out his first book on abortion, Politically Correct Death. And I read it. I didn't understand half of it, but I read it and thought it was great. And we had some early tapes from I think the guy who really brought apologetics to the pro-life movement in the first place, Scott Klusendorf. As far as listening to early Scott Klusendorf tapes and telling people when they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I was telling them I was going to be a pro-life speaker. And basically, I meant I wanted to be Scott Klusendorf when I grew up. I
Still at
loved the
11.
idea of speaking with at 11. I wasn't going to
Okay.
be a firefighter. I wasn't going to be an astronaut. I was or a policeman. I was going to be a pro-life speaker. And I didn't have anything to do with this passion besides learn from books or tapes or whatever. And so not having anything to really be able to plug in, that passion kind of took a back burner for a while. I was really into music, and so I got really involved in music. And then eventually I basically had to make a choice as I ended up starting a Teams for Life group at 18. I started doing pro-life speaking around like youth groups and things like that, and making presentations. And I was into apologetics and I was into speaking. And then I got a contract sent to me from a Nashville agent. So it's kind of like I got to choose either being a professional musician or being a full-time pro-life speaker guy, because you can't do both, well. I was just doing kind of professional music on the side, and I threw away the contract. My parents had raised me, raised me. I don't know what's the grammar there, but I've been raised as a kid to value making an eternal impact, like that kind of thing. And there's so many great musicians and great worship leaders out there, and there's not a lot of great young pro-life speaker guys, or at least there wasn't at the time. And so I threw away the contract and decided to do this. So I've been full-time pro-life movement since I was, really 20, 21 years old. And only 10 years ago launched Equal Rights Institute, the organization that I'm currently running.
Okay. You use the word apologetics, and in a lot of the dialogue that I've watched videos of you speaking, and the dialogue that you have, you use the word apologetics. I think that there's a portion of the population who may not understand what that word means, and you've used it, in a couple of different ways. I've heard you use it as relational apologetics and as apologetics in philosophy, and so it has a broad term, but also specific terms. Can you kind of, before we move into all of that, can you kind of clarify what the meaning of apologetics?
This is a great question. Let's do what good philosophers do and define our terms. So apologetics generally means giving a defense of your faith. It's not apologizing. It's coming from the Greek apologia. It means to defend. So when you hear like Christian apologetics, those are people that are going to be teaching Christians how to defend their Christian views, and there's going to be specialists within that, within in various departments. But apologetics is sort of about defending a certain view. When I talk about relational apologetics, I mean a subsection of that. I mean a very specific style and way of thinking about apologetics, where you are cultivating genuine friendship. Like it's an actual friendship where you care about this person, they care about you. You go through life together, but in that context of that, you can have conversations about hard topics that, a lot of times people can't have very well, because when you're friends with someone, then this is someone that ideally there's going to be trust there. They're going to understand that you're a virtuous person. They're going to understand that if they know that you're pro-life, they know that you're not pro-life because you hate women or something like that. Like they know you too well to buy into something like that. And hopefully they know you well enough to know that you're a thoughtful person too, so that they would take your thoughts more seriously. If you say something that they've heard is just a silly thing that pro-lifers say, but then they hear you say it, be like, well, wait a minute, he's really thoughtful. So like maybe there's more to that, and that kind of a thing. And so a lot of the heart and soul of Equal Rights Institute is trying to encourage pro-life people to have actual genuine friendships with people who aren't like them, who are pro-choice, who are not, white, middle income Catholic. Like we should have a diverse set of friends. Our friends should think differently, and in that context, we can have wonderful conversations where hopefully between like all of us, we are all learning more true things together. It's not just I'm going to try to prove this person how wrong they are about all these things. It's like, no, we're all going to go on a journey together the way that friends ought to, and learn as we go together.
Yeah. And I really like that, because it's something I was talking to Michelle, my wife, about this week, is having a diverse set of friends that we can go on a journey with. I think that culturally there's been this huge shift away from that,
Yes.
into what is commonly referred to as an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that was the weirdest thing. Like, I don't want to just have my own thoughts repeated back to me over and over and over again. How am I going to learn anything?
Right.
So, and what if I'm wrong? Because
Mm-hmm.
I've been proven wrong many, many times in my life. And so I've gone out of my way, through law school. There's obviously a huge difference in, even in Louisiana, like it's conservative, but I had law school friends who went to Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had friends who were on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and it's always been important to me to not remove them from, our social interaction now is really through social
Yeah.
media, but to not remove them just because they have differing views, and even to engage, with some of those views
Yeah.
in a respectful way, because they're still my friends. And
Yeah.
so
We've really lost that lately, right? Like, I think in our society, like what you are doing is exactly what I'm trying to encourage everybody to do. But what you are doing is hard. What you're doing takes such intentionality, because if we're not intentional, then what happens is, then yeah, our social media feeds become these kind of echo chambers, where we are only getting information from our side, or at least maybe when the times that we actually engage and read or watch the video about the topic, we already know it's coming from, at least someone generally speaking on our side. So sort of like everyone kind of
right,
lives in confirmation bias land to some level, and we have to swim against vice. We have to fight really hard against that. Like, I recommend that everyone subscribes to Tangle. Tangle is this wonderful e-newsletter that a friend of mine, Isaac Saul, who used to be in mainstream media, he created this thing because he saw the problem with mainstream media. He said both sides do it. Like, it's a problem on both sides, is that we amplify the worst of the other side. And so then if you're on the left and you only watch MSNBC and Rachel Maddow or Young Turks, then you live in confirmation bias land. If you're on the right and you also only watch Fox News or, Newsmax or whatever, then or Daily Wire, then you also live in confirmation bias land. And so Tangle gives you an opportunity to get in 10 minutes every day, like some good, thoughtful ideas on one political story of the day from both sides. And you start realizing, okay, there are smart people on both sides. There are people that say dumb things on both sides too, right? But like, how do we try to get out of that confirmation bias kind of land to make it more likely, as you said, that we can actually believe true things? Which is even more important now. Like the media situation we have now is pretty unique, where if you only watch one side of like mainstream media, you are dealing with different sets of facts. And so, like, as someone who spends a lot of time reading both sides and sources from both sides, I can tell you, like, that if I wasn't doing that, there are totally whole things about the world that I wouldn't know about. And so it's really important, if we're going to be communicating with people on the other side about things that they really care about, but we don't even know like about half their headlines, that's going to really impact our ability to not only connect with them, but also our ability to believe true things. Because how are you going to believe true things unless you're looking at all the evidence anyway?
right. And how can you understand the person with whom you are having this conversation if without any knowledge of, their foundation of their foundation of knowledge of what they're talking about? And
Absolutely.
so
Like, I used to, as a pro-life speaker guy, like I've been doing this for about 20 years now, almost. And so like, I remember times when I used to straw man the pro-choice side a lot more often. And it was before I made a pro-choice friend. It was before I spent a couple of years really dialoguing with a wonderful, thoughtful pro-choice friend. And between that and some other friendships, and engaging with pro-choice people over like long periods of time, and then doing that a lot at outreach, I just started being able to understand them better. And then you straw man them less, and just kind of like realize, like, okay, yes, there are weak, versions of every argument, but there's some really thoughtful pro-choice people who have some like really legitimate concerns. And I don't feel like the kind of the cultural milieu right now is for us to be hearing what they have to say. Like, that would be sort of countercultural for us to be like, yes, I'm all open ears from the pro-choice side. I just want to hear your concerns. Let's talk about it. Like that would take sort of, I think, a pivot culturally for the movement, and it would be a really good pivot.
Yes, because that's how you have conversations. That's how you have actual critical thinking and civil discourse, and and we're no longer just shouting our hardline views repeatedly as though that's going to have an impact on someone who's shouting at us the exact opposite hardline view.
Right.
Like,
I mean, but it is also
nothing's
that
going to change that way.
Correct. Nothing's going to change if we're just shouting. I mean, it either becomes a shouting match, or at some point it becomes worse than a shouting match, and we don't want that. Like, you don't want this to become violent. It's like, how do we figure out how to talk to each other so that there's not a violence thing? And we need to be able to do better about that. I wanted to highlight another cool thing about you, though, Sean. I know this kind of just makes it sound like I'm just going to pat you on the back all day, but there's another really cool thing. It's not just that you are outside of confirmation bias land, in that you are trying to learn or ingest information from other sources, but you very specifically used what we at ERI internally called open-minded ease. Open-minded ease is the language that open-minded people speak. Like, there's a certain things that only, like I might be wrong about this, but like there's a certain things, like, I've changed my mind about a lot of things you said. And there's a lot of people that they cannot say that they cannot say that they've changed their mind about a lot of at least important things, and so that speaks very highly to intellectual honesty. And I would encourage everyone to consider, like, have you changed your mind about any important issues in the last 10 or 15 years? Because if not, probably you are not getting enough information from both sides. Because I've changed my mind about a bunch of stuff by just kind of getting for access to both sides information and trying to figure out what makes the most sense, and then I end up with a view, and then that makes politics complicated, because then I've got some views that are on the right and some views that are on the left and some views that are kind of libertarian, and so like no one likes me. No, I'm not on really anyone's team at that point, but that's okay, because I think that's what we're supposed to do, is just try to pick like issue by issue, not what is a given party say about the issue. What makes sense?
Right. Yeah. I do think there's something's like powerful that comes with, and I don't suggest this to anyone, but something powerful that comes with being on track at 18 years old to literally do anything I wanted to do, to being 27 years old and homeless, dying in a hotel room of a drug overdose, where no one whose number I had would have answered the phone if I had called, because of the things that I had done to them. There's something just incredibly humbling. And then going to treatment, and being in treatment with people who were no different than me, even though they came from different backgrounds, completely different backgrounds, and living in a house for 45 days with people who had committed huge crimes, and people who had committed small crimes, and people who were just trying to survive. And there's something life-changing about that. And and it took years for me to redirect and go from treatment to figuring out what it was I was going to do, and getting back on path, and going back to college and going to law school. And during that period of uncertainty, I had a lot of time in my head to kind of think, because I had thrown my phone away. I had no more connections to anybody. And I was scared to try to find them, because I wanted to live. And so I didn't. And so I just really had a lot of time in my head to kind of figure things out. I mean, I was bagging groceries at the local grocery store when people I went to college with, were 5 years into their career and coming in, and, and I was bagging their groceries. I mean, that I went to high school with, I should say.
Yeah.
So a lot of, who am I to be holier than thou, I guess, when it comes to a conversation, and to take the opinion that you have to be wrong, or that I understand where you're coming from, because people have to be coming from somewhere. People aren't inherently evil, overall. And so it's just because someone's pro-choice doesn't mean that they are an evil person. They're coming at this from a different place than where I'm coming at it from. And
that's
potentially
really
without
important.
the information that I have. And so, so like you said, that's that common ground that we have to figure out if we're going to have, real dialogue to move this conversation forward. And I think, to bring it back to the Equal Rights Institute, I think that that's a lot of what you're doing with the work. So, if you wouldn't mind sharing, the Equal Rights Institute, and then I do want to get to the newest project you have, because I know that's really exciting and it really fits into what we're hoping to do with Men for Life. But can you tell us a little bit about the Equal Rights Institute, how it started, where it's grown to, and what you're doing?
So about 10 years ago, my brother Tim and I gotten together thinking we were going to write a book on dialogue tips, and instead we ended up dreaming up a new pro-life nonprofit, and that was so not the plan or the intention. But sort of as we were putting together a book proposal, Tim said something that sort of changed our lives. He said, the pro-life movement is not known for its love. And that was just like an ice dagger to the heart, kind of a thing. And I said, yeah, we're not also known for being a real thoughtful group of people either. So like we've got two really big problems if we're going to change culture. And so we started just talking about what was going on in the pro-life movement and what we felt like was going well and what maybe could be going better, and specifically what are areas that we felt like we could be particularly helpful. We had a unique perspective on what it ought to look like when pro-life and pro-choice people talk to each other. But I knew that I wanted to influence the entire movement. I want to help the entire pro-life movement to be less weird and more like Jesus, meaning like, and I'll define both those things. So there's a good weird and bad weird. Like good weird is like those wonderful souls that go, in DC in the freezing cold to do the March for Life, like in spite of all of the hurdles. Like there's good kind of weird, seeing it for your views. When I say I want to help pro-lifers not be weird, I mean that bad weird. We all know those people, that they are well-meaning but off-putting. Like they're getting in their own way of changing people's minds, which is a big problem because it's really hard to change people's minds, especially on this topic anyway. So it's like, don't make it harder, Greg Kokel is
just calling everybody murderers,
right? Yeah, that's just not the way. This is not going to change anyone's mind. Greg Kokel said the gospel message is offensive enough, don't add offense to it. And I love that. I'm like, the pro-life message is offensive, especially post Dobbs. The pro-life message is offensive enough, let's not add more offense to it. Like, let's not go that direction. And so we're sort of trying to help pro-life people in two areas that seem like they are on opposite ends of a spectrum. So I think it seems a little odd on its face. Is on one hand, as we were talking about, I care a lot about relational apologetics. Like, I want to help the pro-life movement to be more like Jesus. Like, I'm fascinated by the question, what would it look like if Jesus talked to a pro-choice person? Like, what would his body language be like? What would he ask? What would he not ask? And what would it sound like when he made arguments that were grounded in truth, but spoken with gentleness and grace? Like what would that look like? And I want to help the whole movement to get closer to that mark. So there's a very kind of relational side of this. And then on the other side, I also love philosophy. I want to help pro-life people to think better and to make fewer bad arguments, or to use fewer like ineffective tactics that we can just kind of like think through and be like, okay, maybe there's reasons not to do this, and not in a kind of like, I want to try to prove that I'm smarter than everyone way, just kind of I want to help everyone be more effective. Like a rising tide raises all ships, and effectiveness is really, really important when it comes to this stuff. This is life and death that we're talking about. These are high stakes. And so I want to help the pro-life movement to become more thoughtful, to become more intellectually virtuous, and to not use so many kind of not very persuasive or even fallacious pro-life arguments. But then I also want us to do it in a much more relational way. I want us to be, I want people to be attracted to talking to us. Like I want us to be approachable. And we could use a lot of help on that. So we do that with speaking and writing. We've got a blog with hundreds of articles. We've got a podcast. Our podcast has been dormant for like a year because we've been finishing Equip for Life Academy that we'll talk about in a little bit. But basically, I paused some things to finish that big project. So we'll be relaunching that soon. But there's a whole bunch of amazing episodes in that archive with, awesome pro-life people like my friend Monica Snyder from Secular Pro-Life and episodes like that. Boy, there's so many things, but speaking, courses, podcasts, in TikTok, like it's this crazy thing that happened a couple of years ago where we decided to just try posting short form pro-life content on TikTok. And we did it kind of like knowing it's not going to work. And then it kind of shocked us into working. And within a year, there were 3 million hits. Like, I don't know why there were so many people on TikTok kind of watching these videos, but we started seeing all, comments and comment after comment after comment from people like, I've changed my mind, or these are the best pro-life arguments that I've seen, like that kind of thing. And so we've kind of switched over to doing a lot of short form video content and putting that on Instagram and YouTube, and it's kind of trying to find different ways to show pro-life people the things that we've learned in our conversations with pro-choice people. What are the mistakes to avoid? What are the things that seem to be working the best?
How do you break down, and this I may be overcomplicating this in thought, but when you talk about short form video, so like, how do you break down into 60 seconds or less something that is so important? And probably that question comes from as a lawyer being trained to be overly verbose, use too many words in what I'm trying to say, and that's always been a criticism of the legal profession, and something I tried not to do, but I find myself even in this question using way too many words to ask it. So how do you do that? How do you break down the argument into a 60-second clip?
Yeah, so I'll link, or I might send you a link to a post that we did on this, on kind of a pro-life soundbite. But the short version is that we're encouraging pro-lifers to talk about abortion as a conflict of rights issue, which is so not what pro-choice people are expecting us to talk about anyway. We basically say we think abortion is a really complicated conflict of rights issue. You've got kind of two complicated things in conflict with each other. On one hand, you've got the unborn embryo or fetus, and we've got really good reasons to believe that this is not just a living human organism, but it's a valuable person like you and me that should have equal rights, and we can talk about that if you want. But then you've also got a woman's right to do what she wants with her body, and generally not have like any kind of government interference with the kinds of decisions that she would make that affect her body. Like, generally speaking, that's true too. And so you've got this really tricky conflict here. And so while I do believe bodily autonomy is really important, and we can talk about that, I don't ultimately think that it trumps the baby's right to life. I don't think that we have the right to directly kill people, and I believe that the unborn are that. But I would say, and I always include, if her life is at risk and there's no way to save them both, then I absolutely think that she should be able to medically intervene to save her life. Like, I basically think all of that needs to happen in every pro-life soundbite. Is you're going to need to include a life with a mother exception, because they're not expecting it. At this point, there's too many pro-life people that have sort of accidentally communicated, I think, or miscommunicated to the other side that we are actually against, like, even intervening to save women who are dealing with tubal pregnancies or things like that, and some of the rhetoric.
So on that, I think that's really important, because you're still not supporting abortion in that argument. What you're supporting is the right of a mother whose life may be in danger,
right,
like imminent danger of death, to make a choice.
So so I'll jump in. So it's a little bit tricky. So and this is where a lot of the confusion happens here. So what I'm talking about, if you think of like tubal pregnancies, I would put those, like, a lot of the medical community and like most pro-choice people would say that even a self-injectomy, like the Catholic Church supports, United States Council of Catholic Bishops would support, if a woman has a tubal pregnancy. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to Star Trek beam the baby from the fallopian tube to the uterus or an artificial womb, and so we remove that entire fallopian tube, or at least a section of it, as sort of the least direct way to act. And then you remove that. A lot of people within the pro-life movement would not call that an abortion. But what they mean is that it's not an elective abortion. But a lot of the medical community would say that's a kind of an abortion, that an abortion is sort of any medical procedure where you're starting with something with a living embryo, and by the end of it, you're not. They would use the word abortion more broadly. So what I've been encouraging pro-life people to do is just, like, instead of using language in our own kind of unique way, that we can just say, regardless of what you call that, regardless of what you call it, if we have to intervene to save a woman's life who is tragically having a life-threatening pregnancy, of course that's okay, and I have no problem calling that an abortion. Let's not call it an elective abortion, because it's not. It's an inelective abortion. Yeah. It's not an abortion that she's choosing for socioeconomic reasons. or that someone else is coercing or something like that. This is an intellective. There is a major health issue going on that doctors are trying to intervene and help, regardless of whether or not she would have wanted to have the baby or not. They're just very different things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. As a man,
Yeah.
in this, in this arena
Movement. Yeah.
Like as a man, what obstacles have you found, and to just jump to a question I had for later, when it comes to the argument, you don't have a uterus, therefore you have no voice, right? That's basically what I was faced with when my son was killed in an abortion. I had, whether that wasn't directly said, but that is the thought behind the reason that it didn't matter what I said. That is the thought behind the reason that if I had gone to the abortion center and said, I'm not okay with this, they wouldn't have cared. Or if I had gone to the Florida where I was living, judiciary, I would not have been able to do anything. Not my uterus. Therefore, as a man, I have no voice. So there's that argument, which I think kind of goes into, as a man in the pro-life movement, like, what have you found to be the biggest obstacles or roadblocks in your way, or for men in general?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think the biggest obstacle, one of the biggest obstacles is bad pro-life men, that we get compared to, right? And so there are people that don't stand up for women or say things that are really demeaning about women in the process of their pro-life advocacy. So that would be, that's super unhelpful. But I think, just generally speaking, it is just understandable, but an obstacle that people think of this as a women's issue. And it just seems a little bit weird as soon as they look at someone that looks like me and be like, why are you spending your life doing this? It's going to come up in, almost every conversation I have about abortion at an outreach. Like, why do you care? Why should you have a voice on this? And at ERI, like one of the things that reasons that I created ERI was to create like an innovative, flexible apologetics organization, because we know that truth doesn't change, but culture does. And so the arguments or the tactics or the way of communicating that will be persuasive, that will actually be the most likely to change someone's mind, that does change as culture changes. And so I'm not terribly interested in what worked 20 years ago. I want to know what's working right now. And what would make sense to be working right now based on, what psychologists are observing are, differences between kind of these generations, and kind of like, how do we keep our finger on that pulse? So since we understand that truth changes, that truth doesn't change and culture does, when we go into a college campus, we are trying things. We are trying to figure out like what's working well. I've got a Google Doc of ideas. I'll be like, hey, are these things that might be useful? And sometimes I try things that don't work very well. Sometimes we try things and they do work really well. And responding to the You're a Man challenge is an area where we've tried a bunch of different responses and there's been a clear winner. Like, there's not even really a clear second place. There's a clear winner in what's working. And I think I understand why. It's because what we do to respond to the You're a Man is we steel man the argument. Instead of straw man the argument where you attack a lame version of it, we want to attack a stronger, like, what is the strongest possible version of this argument? So the lamest version of the no uterus, no opinion thing is just like, it's like a sexist ad hominem attack, basically. And you can respond to it as that. And sometimes that's perfectly justified. But there's like kind of a more interesting version of this argument that even like conservatives sort of say, just on a different topic. It's a similar argument for some pro-choice people as when people say that you should not be allowed to really have an opinion about spanking or fill in the blank form of child discipline until you have your own kids. There are people that will say that, and they're making the exact same argument that some pro-choice people are making, which is that you just need to have a certain amount of experiential knowledge in order to have a chance of fully understanding the topic. Like, you need to have some experiential knowledge. So the way that we respond to that is by saying, okay, you're right. I'm a man. I couldn't ever really fully understand pregnancy. I can't understand the bodily changes. I can't understand the different types of social stigma that can come with that. I can't understand childbirth. all of those things. I'm with you. Here's the reason I still think it's okay for someone like me to have an opinion and be having conversations about this. Is if I went to the lake, like if I brought like a camera, I was gonna do some landscape photography at the lake, right? I'm setting up my shot. And I look over to my left, and let's just say that I see a woman doing something strange. She's pushing her car into the lake, right? And there's a baby in the car seat, in the back seat. And so what's going on for this woman is that she's going through major postpartum depression, something that I as a man can't fully understand. There is like a postpartum depression that men can experience, but it's different than the postpartum depression that women experience. And so I can't understand what a woman experiencing severe postpartum depression is going through. And that will affect my attitude toward her. Like, my attitude toward her is not going to be this like judgy, pharisaical, like, wagging my finger at her, like, how dare you do this, gross, unholy thing, or something like that. Or like, no, it's gonna be like, what is going on for this poor person who like feels so at the end of the rope that this seems like the best of the options? Like, how can I help her? I'm also going to try to help the kid, though, at the same time. Like, that seems reasonable to me, to try to want to help them both, in spite of the fact that I can't fully understand postpartum depression. Similarly, I can't fully understand what pregnancy is like, but I have a lot of thoughts about equality and human value, and how to try to make sense of that. And they're very similar arguments that a lot of my female pro-life friends and colleagues make, by the way, and so I'd be interested in hearing, like, come back at me, help me understand, what do you think about that? And I'll say there's no argument that works every time. There's no silver bullet argument, but we have had a lot of great experiences where you have like a really, really angry, yelling, person who's just completely livid that there's a man here on campus talking about this. And after telling that story, them being like, okay, I guess that kind of makes sense. All right, so let's talk about the issue. Like, I think a lot of what the heavy lifting there is the postpartum depression thing, is that we are comparing to another thing that men can't fully understand, and just going with that, and saying, I still don't think it means what you think it should mean.
Yeah. And I really like what you said about, the compassion towards the mother in that situation, because obviously, you have to have compassion towards the mother, because that's not something that someone in their best position would do.
And I want to add to that. I'm glad that you underlined the compassion part. Let's talk about, because that is another hurdle, I think, for pro-life men. Like, having spent a lot of time doing seminars for pro-life men and women, I've had a fairly common experience. In fact, I actually just did this in Wisconsin this last weekend, where in the seminar we had like 40 people there. So I split up the men and women, and we lined up the men against the wall. This is not original. I saw Justice for All do this a long time ago. And I had the women lined up against them, and they kind of gave them a hard time for a while about abortion in the case of rape, kind of giving them experience of kind of what campus is going to be like. And their goal was to be able to communicate and be able to acknowledge how horrible rape is, and to show the genuine compassion that they have. I told them, this is not about faking compassion. If you don't actually have compassion, or an adequate amount of compassion for survivors of rape, and that's what they want to be called, don't call them victims, they want to be called survivors of rape, then that's a problem with your soul. Like, you need to talk to your pastor, or your priest, or a therapist, or something like that. Like, that's an issue. But assuming you have the compassion that you ought to have, then we need to do a better job of showing that to people. So if the topic of rape comes up, like, I'm spending a minute talking about how it's one of the worst things that I know about, and all the horrible things that are going on for a woman kind of going through that, before I even think about making a pro-life argument. But a lot of times what happens is pro-life guys will make an attempt to show compassion, and it ends up sounding like a script. I'll never forget an experience at a seminar one time where I was listening to a man do his best to, in just a role play dialogue with a pro-life friend, a friendly person, doing his best to show compassion. And I remember thinking to myself, this man knows the definition of rape, but he doesn't really know what rape is. And you could tell he hadn't taken the time to really mentally process what that could be like coming from the perspective of the survivor. And that's really obvious to people. Like, people can read each other really well. Our newest staff person, Rebecca Carlson, was talking about this recently. It was just so great. She just noted, like, a lot of the dialogue tips that we teach, just like, in the end, this is more about the heart work that you need to do before having dialogue, because people can read each other really well. And if you're trying to fake compassion or something like that, they're going to be able to read that all over your face.
Yeah. And I think that's something that gets lost a lot in the dialogues on social media. You can't read the face. And so there's this assumption, regardless of the words. I mean, I can read any sentence from another person in a way that is completely offensive by the way that I've read it out loud.
Yes.
But it's not even an offensive sentence. And so
this is why when I was doing
that.
When I was doing social media debate for a while, I would try. I've not really been on social media for the last couple of years, just because it doesn't seem like the most healthy thing for me. But when I was doing that, like, social media debate, what I would try to do is write my thing. I'd write my response. Hopefully not more than 2 paragraphs. Like, don't do the wall of text thing. And I would actually proof it. I'd reread it twice. Once is like for grammar and punctuation and clarity and all that. But one of them was just for tone. I was just trying to read it for, like, how does this come across tone-wise if I read it not like myself? If I kind of, like, read it, put myself in the shoes of someone who's maybe coming from this from a different angle or a different perspective and maybe a lot angrier at me, like, that makes it a lot harder. But if you can do that and you start finding ways to tweak it and you just make it at least harder for the other person to misunderstand it or think that it's something a lot worse than it is.
I can appreciate that helping people to find their inner compassion is easier when we use an extreme example like rape, where someone's rights are clearly violated and there's violence. I think that same level of compassion can be transferred to just the general person confronted with abortion.
Say more.
In many of the things that I've posted, I've then been attacked for, hating the mother of my unborn child. And I always go back and watch it, and 100% of the times have found that I have not said anything at all about the mother. Didn't even acknowledge that there was a mother other than the fact that there was a baby, because my story is not her story. I do not have this huge ocean of negativity towards her. I don't have any idea what she was confronted with 27 years ago. I do not have any idea what the external forces were. I do not have any idea what her frame of reference was going into that situation. I don't have any idea what or how that has impacted her over the past 27 years. And I'm not suggesting that I know that it did. I have no idea. And so if I have no idea where someone is coming from, but I believe that abortion is killing babies, and I believe that a mother who is in her best position would not make the decision to kill her baby, then I have to believe that there is something that I'm unaware of that is impacting that decision. And so that's why I have to try to figure out, like, how do I approach this with compassion? I don't know, if I connected all those dots well.
I've got a couple of thoughts. One, I think a lot of times pro-life people, as they are in the pro-life movement, they will hopefully have a lot of opportunities to hear true stories, true testimonies from women who've chosen abortion. So as someone who speaks at a lot of pregnancy center banquets, I've heard from a lot of women all over the country who at some point made this what they ended up feeling like was the most difficult and the hardest decision of their life. And my compassion for the circumstances that women find themselves in has only grown as a result. So, for example, the pro-life movement for a while now, for well over a decade, has spoken about the problem of coercive abortions. There is one, I think, relatively small study, so take this statistic with a grain of salt. But there is one survey that indicated that 64% of women experiencing abortion indicated that she was feeling coerced that day. And the word coerced can mean a lot. That doesn't mean that she's literally being dragged by her hair into the clinic or something, but it means that she was feeling pressure. She was being pressured by who? Like the jerk boyfriend, or maybe her parents, sometimes her pastor or a youth pastor. I mean, there's various forces kind of at work. So like, I was really glad when the pro-life movement was talking about that, because if that's true, if that statistic is even remotely close to true, then it's like over half of women having abortions, they didn't really feel like it was even their choice. Like that should be a massive sea change in the way that, kind of that you look at pro-choice people. And then if you add to that, there's something, a few years ago, myself and several other pro-life guys, Eric Schuyler, Jonathan Van Maren, and Charles Camosi drafted a joint statement for the pro-life movement that a ton of pro-life leaders and people eventually signed. But in that joint statement, we were talking about the problem of unwanted abortions. And by unwanted abortions, we actually meant something even further than just abortions that are being coerced by the boyfriend or the parents or someone, but like where the woman feels coerced by her circumstances. Sometimes it's not a boyfriend. Sometimes it's just like, our sidewalk counselors, I'll hear from them, be like, does this women just feel like they don't have another option? They feel like they're just out of options. And so they are here. In fact, one of the reasons why, one of the most positive, encouraging things I've learned about sidewalk counseling is how many people will show up just kind of looking for a way out. And if there's someone there that is just smiling and friendly and approachable and not holding a big graphic sign, and probably not a bullhorn either, like they're like approachable and able to come to them and connect with them, then we can try to, help them in that area that they are in need of. So there's a lot of kind of room there for awesome pro-life men to grow in their compassion. I think sometimes it takes learning a lot of different stories about how do women end up in all these different circumstances where this felt like the best option for them.
You have finally, and I say finally using your term. I'm not telling you that I that I was pressuring you to have done it soon.
It's been
using
years.
your term, right, that you've worked on for years, the Equipped for Life Academy.
Yeah.
And if you could share with us what the Equipped for Life Academy is, and I, I think it's important in the beginning to kind of put out there, when I watched the announcement video, one of the things you brought up was how this could be used for high school and college students. But as I went further into the video, the way I understand it, it can really be used by anyone who is looking for tools as to be a compassionate fighter in the pro-life movement.
Yes, absolutely.
So even the men that we are reaching out to who may not be college or high school students, but at another season of their life, but are looking for the tools that they need to have these conversations. I think the Equipped for Life Academy is an amazing place to start. So if you could share with us a little bit about that, I think that'd be great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, there's a couple of sort of categories of guys that should be thinking, like, because even if you're not thinking, oh, I need to learn from that, if you know of like teachers, if you know Christian educators who might be open to trying to put an awesome pro-life curriculum into their Christian or Catholic high school, like, we're looking for connection points on that. We're also just looking for awesome dads who are like, we're going to do this as a family. Like, if you've got teenagers, please, before they go to college, like, go through this course together and do the activities together. Like, this is made as a curriculum for people to learn as a group. Like, we know that there are always people that just kind of solo go through a course, and it's fine and it can work that way, but it's really designed to be learned in a group. So it's the first time we've made a curriculum for a mixed audience. We'd made courses before for like, pro-life college clubs. We made a course for sidewalk counselors. But this is a course that we made specifically for religious high schools, homeschool co-ops, knowing that means that there will be pro-choice students forced to sit there and listen to this and participate in the activity. So it's not just written for a pro-life audience. It's also written for a pro-choice audience. It's also written for the kids in the middle. There's like, I don't want to talk about it. And so we try, so kind of with all of those people in mind, we very gently and respectfully to both sides walk through, not only dialogue tips, but the abortion kind of conversation part by part. And what was one of my favorite things that we got to do was we got to do something that we couldn't do the first time we made a course. The first time that we made a pro-life apologetics course, I didn't know how to use cameras or anything. We didn't have any equipment. We had 3 days of studio time at this cool Christian studio, and we needed all of that just to be able to get all the ideas out. We had intended to be able to film these kind of role play dialogues together, but we just didn't have time. But we wanted to film role play dialogues because we've learned that for a lot of people, when they learn apologetics, you can teach them all the tools and they can kind of have this toolbox or tool belt or however you want to kind of envision it. But a lot of people need the mortar that goes between the bricks. Like, how are you transitioning from one tool to the other? Or how are you dealing with people when they say this, like that kind of thing? So this time, by the time we filmed Equip for Life Academy, we had bought our own equipment, and I had put myself through sort of YouTube film school, and that gave us sort of a lot more flexibility. So we went and filmed these role play dialogues out in parks, like out in Charlotte and DC and things, and just kind of showing like, what could it sound like when two non-weird young pro-life women as friends talk about the issue, and kind of give people that resource as a way to kind of understand like how can this sound in real time, is something that we were able to do. So it's a single unit course. It's 8 1-hour lessons and 6 optional hour-long lessons, and it's just got everything that the teachers can need. Like another thing that we couldn't do the first time we made a course was make it for teachers, because I don't know how to make stuff for teachers. I like that's not what I do. God sent us a couple of awesome people with teaching credentials who understood how to be able to write content, how to be able to write grading rubrics and formative assessments and summative assessments and like all these things that I have no idea how to do. So this meets Catholic education standards, and it's just like it's at a professional level that we couldn't have done before. So we just are hoping to get it into every Protestant and Catholic religious high school we can, every homeschool co-op. There's various kind of sizes, just kind of based on how many students that you have. But if people want to learn more, see the trailer, they can check it out at equipforlifeacademy.com. It's equipforlifeacademy.com.
That's awesome. That is really exciting. And I saw we talked about this before we started recording, but I can see the passion and the excitement in your eyes and in your voice and in your body language whenever you were talking about how excited you were to have this project out. So that is really exciting. Not just
I'm just
for
so
you guys,
excited
but
for what it can do. I'm so excited for
Yeah.
what it can do. It's like imagine a different world. I mean, that's what philosophers do anyway, right? Let's think of an alternative universe where what if like in 20 years the pro-life movement is filled with leaders who've been trained well from the beginning on here are some bad habits to avoid and some bad arguments to avoid and bad tactics to avoid. Here are like the most awesome, persuasive pro-life arguments that exist, and here's how to communicate them in a way that is friendly and not off-putting. What if you just got that into a ton of schools? I just feel like we could have a completely different pro-life movement in a decade or two, and that makes me just super excited. It's like I know that the next short term for the pro-life movement is probably going to be a pretty difficult one, but I'm so optimistic for the long term of the pro-life movement, because the young people that I am working with, both at the colleague level and the people that I'm training, are amazing. This group from Wisconsin was amazing, and some of them are going to become pro-life leaders in the future, and they're going to be amazing. And so, yes, I'm super optimistic for the long-term future of the pro-life movement.
I like how you said that, and you brought up something that is important, and that is that your concern. I don't think you used the word concern, but that in the short term, it's not super optimistic. Um, I mentioned to you before we were recording that I had a conversation with somebody who, in fundraising for pro-life organizations, who had said that his donor base was way down and people were telling him, well, since the Dobbs decision, the abortion fight is over. What would you say to someone who is holding that belief? And we don't have to get into, I know we're running short on time and we're kind of out of time, into, all the things that are up for elections and bills today. But just in general, to someone who suggests that since the Dobbs decision, the abortion fight is over, what would you say to someone in that position?
Yeah, I would say, and I didn't coin this phrase. Someone else smarter than me, I'm sure did. But Dobbs or Roe v. Wade being overturned was a checkpoint, not the finish line. That's basically what I've been telling people. It's a really important checkpoint. It kind of changes everything. Like the pro-life movement is sort of having to figure out, what does pro-life movement version 3.0 look like, or whatever version number this would be. But it's definitely a different version number because almost everything has changed as a result of Roe being overturned. And there are problems that need to be solved that used to be academic problems that we never really thought were going to be an issue, because no one in the pro-life movement really thought that Roe was going to be overturned. Like we
Right.
are kind of like that dog that finally caught the mail truck, and now it's kind of like, now what happens? Like it's difficult. There's a lot of smart people trying to figure out the best direction to go here, but there are a lot of particular challenges for the pro-life movement right now, and it is going to be a rocky road. But what I would tell people is certainly the pro-life fight is not over. In fact, by a lot of political estimates, the pro-life side loses basically every time it comes to a vote. Like in the public opinion level, we've gone way backwards in the last 4 or 5 years. And so I've been telling that means that it's time to train. Like I keep thinking about, this is one of my favorite shows of all time is Band of Brothers. I'm assuming you've seen Band of Brothers, Sean, on HBO.
I've seen some of the episodes. Yes.
Okay, you're gonna have to see the rest of it because it's so good. Okay, so just to make the quick analogy, so Band of Brothers is about World War II. It's greater World War II. This is what Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg, they made it after they did Saving Private Ryan. But it's this 10-episode miniseries that follows Easy Company. This is one of the first companies of paratroopers, meaning guys who strapped on parachutes and rifles and jumped off out of planes behind enemy lines. That was a brand new idea in World War II. So they had to pay these guys extra to go and do something that crazy. So Easy Company, their first day of battle is D-Day, behind enemy lines on D-Day. But that's not the first episode. That's episode 2. The first episode is all about their boot camp at Camp Currahee in Georgia, where they had to run up and down this 3.5-mile mountain, over and over and over sometimes. Like, they actually thought that the captain running things for a while was sadistic. And maybe he was. It was terrible. But here's the point. A lot of those guys would end up saying that they needed that boot camp, that they needed that grueling of a boot camp, because what they were getting ready to go into in the war was actually going to be so much harder. Like, these guys had a real hard time of it. They end up in a snowy winter front without good winter gear. It's nuts for these guys, but they went through that boot camp and that prepared them. I think there are a lot of pro-life people that haven't really done boot camp. I think there's a lot of pro-life people that are like, oh yeah, I know, it's obvious. It's wrong to kill babies. So it's either right or wrong to kill babies. And I don't really need that much more. Why should I have to learn from philosophical arguments to defend it being wrong to kill babies, kind of a thing? And I'm here to say, but it's more complicated than you think, as someone who's been doing this for a really long time. And the pro-choice arguments are getting smarter. They're getting better. And if we are going to be ready to confront that, then we need to take ourselves through boot camp. So Equip for Life Academy is an awesome boot camp to kind of get yourself ready, and then get activated and go out and then be able to make such a bigger difference. If you're only going to have, occasional opportunities in your life that are not kind of created intentionally, where this is going to come up, then you want to be ready when it comes up. And
right.
so it's time for boot camp. This is a really hard time to be doing pro-life work, and it's hard for understandable reasons. And those are all reasons that should compel pro-life people to hey, you know what? I need to sharpen my skills. If there's any time to sharpen your skills, this is the time, because, you know, just like people a lot of times don't take boot camp real seriously in peacetime, they sure do when there's a war going on. And I don't want to make too many war analogies, because there's a lot of ways that that analogy breaks down. We're not at war with the pro-choice side or something like that. But I do want to see people getting trained up and getting ready to go out there and make as big of a difference as they can in changing hearts and minds.
This has been one of the coolest conversations I've ever had.
Oh, thank you.
You've got so much energy, you know, that I could do this for another hour. If we had the time. So we'll have to do it for another hour.
We'll have to do that. We'll have to come back and do this again sometime.
That's right. But I really appreciate you coming on, and just I'm gonna say this, then I want you to correct me or add anything that you need to add. But the way that people can support you, the way that people can find you is, you know, the Equal Rights Institute, and that is a nonprofit organization.
Yep.
So, you know, you're sustained by donors, and so, you know, if our listeners, you know, are feeling encouraged to help in this movement, you know, to help with the Equal Rights Institute, please go to is it equalrightsinstitute.com?
Yep, that's right. Thank you.
That correct website. I know that you're on all the social platforms.
Yep.
Under the Equal Rights Institute.
Yep.
And then they can find the news project, you know, the educational wing of that at the equippedforlifeacademy.com.
Yep.
Is there anywhere else that people can find or support you?
No, that would be the main thing. Certainly, equalrightsinstitute.com is going to be the hub for if you're looking for, like, are you looking for the blog? Are you looking for links to the podcast? Are you wanting to learn about the affiliate group program, where we'll help kind of train your group for free? Are you looking for Equipped for Life Academy, like kind of, or are you looking to financially support us? I will absolutely. We would be so happy to receive some financial support from people who are excited about kind of our vision for the future of the pro-life movement. So yeah, they can find all of that at equalrightsinstitute.com. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yes, and thank you, Josh. Thank you for coming on, and we'll say a prayer for your sick child. And hopefully there's a quick recovery there, because I know there's not much you can do except
that's right.
Halt your day and take care of them.
Me too. We'll just see what happens. I'm sorry?
How many kids do you have?
We have 3 boys. They're about 16, 14, and 12. So at this point, yeah, if one gets sick, a lot of times it's not just going to be one, but we'll see what happens. I will just go and be the best father and husband I can be under the circumstances.
That's right. That's all you can do. Well, that's awesome. All right, Josh. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you. You too.